Meet Ikpendu, the only man in the history of Odugba village who married two wives from different elements, one from land and one from water. He did not marry them at the same time, but he married them with confidence. Many years ago, Odugba sat beside a wide, stubborn river that behaved like a woman with mood swings. On calm days, it glittered like polished glass. On angry days, it swallowed canoes without apology. The village depended on it for fish, trade, gossip, baiting, and sometimes punishments. Ikpendu grew up like every other fisherman's son. He was lousy with skinny legs and ambition bigger than his father's canoe. As a young man, he was not the richest. He was simply clever. He studied the tides and counted fish movements. He knew which corner of the river was generous and which parts liked to embarrass careless men. Then came the storm. One fateful day, Odugba experienced a storm so violent that even the elders stopped pretending to be brave. The sky darkened at noon. Thunder slapped the river repeatedly and their boats flipped. Men screamed prayers that were not part of their normal vocabulary. Unfortunately and fortunately, Ikpendu's canoe was caught in the middle of that chaos. People watched from the shore as the waves lifted him like a leaf. His boat snapped and his body disappeared beneath the water. His mother fainted that day. One elder shook his head and said, "The river has chosen." However, by morning, the storm passed, and there at the riverbank sat Ikpendu, alive, breathing fine, and beside him sat a woman no one had seen before. She did not shiver. Her wrapper looked dry and her hair flowed down her back like wet silk, even though the ground was muddy. "Who is she?" someone asked. Ikpendu stood up slowly and said, "She saved me." The woman said nothing. Her eyes were just calm. They asked her name and she looked towards the river before answering, "Omasiridi." Nobody asked what it meant because in villages, when mystery speaks, you nod respectfully. From that day, Ikpendu's life changed. His fishing nets became greedy. They caught fish when other nets returned empty. His boat stopped leaking and worked perfectly, while his rival's engine failed mysteriously. If 5 men cast nets beside him, Ikpendu's own would come up heavy, while theirs would carry disappointment. "It is luck," some people said, but Ikpendu replied proudly, "No, it is hard work." Omasiridi began living near the edge of his compound, in a small building closest to the narrow footpath that led to the water. She did not complain or demand. Also, she rarely visited the village well, but somehow she had water. When she wanted to bathe, she would walk toward the river at odd hours, at dawn or at midnight when most people were either sleeping or pretending not to watch. Children liked her and cats followed her around like unpaid assistants. One afternoon, an old fisherman approached Ikpendu and said, "My son, that woman who appeared with you after the incident." "Yes," Ikpendu replied. "She is not ordinary," the old man said. Ikpendu laughed loudly. "No woman is ordinary." The old man did not smile. He warned, "I would just advise you to respect what carried you." Ikpendu waved him away. "I am not a child. She's my companion, nothing more." But the village had eyes. Women noticed that Omasiridi did not eat much, and even when she did, she preferred fresh fish without salt. On some nights, a faint glow seemed to surround her skin under the moonlight. One brave boy once muttered, "She's the mermaid." His mother slapped the back of his head immediately. "Shh! Don't call spirits carelessly." As for Ikpendu, he ignored the rumors and concentrated on his wealth, which was growing too fast for humility. And then, after 2 years, his relatives began pressuring him to get married to a woman they could understand. You must marry properly, his aunts insisted. Ikpendu agreed easily. Why not? After all, he was very rich now. That was how Uredi entered the story. Uredi came from the neighboring village. She was confident, well-spoken, and educated enough to count money faster than most men. She walked like someone who believed the ground should appreciate her footsteps. When she arrived in Odugba for the introduction, she noticed Omasiridi standing near the river path. "Who is that?" she asked. Ikpendu cleared his throat and said, "She lives here." "As what?" Uredi asked. Ikpendu hesitated briefly and replied, "As Omasiridi." Uredi narrowed her eyes slightly. "That is not a role." Ikpendu smiled confidently. "She came into my life after the storm." "And she stayed?" Uredi asked. "Yes," Ikpendu replied. Uredi frowned. "And you expect me to marry you with her inside your compound?" Ikpendu leaned closer and lowered his voice. "She's not a competition." Uredi crossed her arms. "But she's a woman." "She's different," Ikpendu replied. "How?" Uredi asked. Ikpendu struggled for a clear answer. He simply said, "She belongs to the river." Uredi laughed sharply. "So, you are telling me you are sharing your house with the mermaid?" Now, Ikpendu did not confirm it or deny it. He only said, "I am Ikpendu," as if that explained everything. Uredi stared at him for a long moment. Then she shrugged. "I will marry you, but understand this, I am the wife." Ikpendu smiled proudly. Of course. On their wedding day, everything was loud. Goats screamed and palm wine spilled generously. Omasiridi attended quietly, dressed in a simple blue cloth. She did not compete for attention or dance. She simply watched. During the celebration, one woman leaned towards another to do cho-cho-cho. "Does Uredi know?" "She knows," the other woman replied. "And she still married him?" "Have you seen his boats? He's wealthy now." They both nodded knowingly. After the wedding, the compound was divided naturally. Uredi took the main house with the big bed, bright curtains, and front sitting room, while Omasiridi remained near the river path. They greeted each other politely. "Good morning," Uredi would say. "Good morning," Omasiridi would reply. There was no drama. Ikpendu strutted around proudly like a man who had achieved something historic. "This is balance," he would say during village meetings. "Land and water." Men laughed and even praised him. "You are strong." "You are blessed," another man would add. Ikpendu believed them all. One evening, as the sun melted into the river, he stood between both houses feeling powerful. He had married prosperity and respect. He had even married mystery. What could possibly go wrong? See, if you entered Ikpendu's compound for the first time, you would think two different worlds were sharing one fence. Uredi ran her house like a queen managing a small kingdom. She gave instructions clearly, supervised the maids, and arranged chairs properly before visitors arrived. She wore bold, bright wrappers and matching head ties that announced her presence before she spoke. On the other hand, Omasiridi did not supervise anybody. She rarely gave orders. She moved gently, and if she even spoke, she did not raise her voice. Yet, somehow, fish would appear in her kitchen before sunrise. Fresh, large, and clean fish. One morning, Uredi stood in her doorway and watched Omasiridi walk toward the river. "Does she not get tired?" Uredi asked aloud. Ikpendu was tying his wrapper. "Tired of what?" he asked. "Of acting mysterious," Uredi added. Ikpendu laughed. "She does not act." Uredi folded her arms. "Then what does she do? Floats?" Ikpendu avoided that conversation skillfully. "She minds her business. You too mind yours." Uredi gave him a look that said, "I am not blind." Now, in Odugba, Women gather every afternoon near the well to fetch closer water and exchange information that is more accurate than any town crier's announcements. That week, the well was very active. One of the women asked, "Have you seen the way Omasiridi walks? She does not step heavily," another woman replied. "I heard she does not menstruate." "That one is not your business," so one older woman snapped. "But is it true?" the first woman insisted. The older woman leaned closer and said, "I saw her once at midnight. She was standing inside the river. The water was up to her waist and she was not even shaking." The younger women gasped dramatically. "She's the mermaid." "Shh, don't say that word carelessly," the older woman warned. Meanwhile, in the compound, tension was growing. One afternoon, Uredi entered the kitchen and noticed something. 3 large fish lay neatly on the table. She called the maid and asked, "Who bought this?" The maid shook her head quickly. "I don't know, ma. They were just there." Uredi frowned. She marched towards Omasiridi's door and called, "Omasiridi?" "Yes," came the soft reply. "Did you bring fish into my kitchen?" Omasiridi looked at her calmly and said, "The river provided." "That is not an answer," Uredi glared. Omasiridi tilted her head slightly. "Fish belong to water before it belonged to markets." Uredi stared at her. "You speak like a riddle." Omasiridi smiled faintly. "You hear like a judge." The conversation ended there, but it didn't end in Uredi's mind. That evening, Ikpendu returned from a meeting boasting loudly. "The elders are planning a river festival and they want me to lead the procession." "Of course they do," Uredi said proudly. "You are the richest." Omasiridi was seated quietly near the doorway. She looked towards the river instead of him. Ikpendu noticed and asked jokingly, "What? Even the river approves?" Omasiridi's eyes remained calm. She just said, "The river does not approve," loudly. Uredi rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. River, river, river." Also, she had begun mocking Omasiridi with every opportunity she gets. One afternoon, she mocked Omasiridi openly while arranging her jewelry. "At least my bride price was paid in full, unlike some free people," she declared confidently. Strangely, after she said those words, her gold earring slided from her ear and fell directly into the bowl of stew she was cooking. She gasped while her maid froze. Uredi removed the earring quickly and muttered, "It must be a coincidence." The next week, she scolded a maid near the river path. "Don't wash my clothes there, oh. That place smells like that fish woman." That same evening, her expensive imported wrapper tore in the middle while she was walking to the market. The women gasped loudly, while Uredi laughed awkwardly and insisted, "It is bad stitching." But inside, she had started to suspect Omasiridi. However, Ikpendu remained comfortable. He enjoyed telling jokes during palm wine gatherings. He would say, "Land wife gives me fire. The water wife gives me calmness." The men laughed loudly. Chief, you have balanced destiny, oh." Ikpendu would raise his cup proudly and nod. "I am a wise man." One night, as the moonlight poured over the compound, Uredi stood by the window watching Omasiridi outside. Omasiridi stood facing the river. Her hair was loose and her back was straight. The water shimmered strangely under the moon. Uredi felt a chill for no clear reason, but she shook it off and whispered to herself, "She's just a woman." Yet, she could not deny that whenever she insulted Omasiridi harshly, something bad happened to her, and whenever she showed small courtesy, peace returned. One evening, a group of children were playing near the river bank. One boy ran to Uredi excitedly. Auntie, I saw her talking to fish." Uredi bent down. "Fish do not speak, dear boy." But the boy insisted. She was standing there. The fish were jumping around her. Already laughed. You children like stories too much. But when she looked towards the river path, she saw Omasiridi walking back slowly. Her wrapper was damp at the edges, even though there had been no rain. That night, already asked Ikpendu a question she had avoided. If she's truly from the water, why did you marry her? Ikpendu smiled confidently. Because I can. Already frowned. That is not an answer. Ikpendu shrugged. You are my public wife. She's different. Already's eyes narrowed. Different how? Ikpendu hesitated. Some blessings do not need explanation. Already turned away, but the words did not turn away from her. They followed her into her sleep. Some blessings do not need explanation. Which one was she? A blessing that needed ceremony and bride price? As the river festival approached quickly, the villagers adjusted their walking steps and dressing patterns. In Oduba, this annual festival was not a small play. It was the day the village thanked the water for fish, for trade, and for not swallowing too many people that year. Drums would beat from morning until night. Chiefs would wear beads heavy enough to cause them neck pain, and women would cook as if they were feeding the entire ocean. Ikpendu was chosen to lead the Thanksgiving procession because he had money and influence, but mostly because it had been proven that he had what people called river favor. His boat had not capsized since after the storm. His nets still embarrassed other fishermen. 3 days before the festival, elders gathered in his compound to discuss the arrangements. One elder cleared his throat. Chief Ikpendu, both your wives will appear during the Thanksgiving. Already straightened immediately. Of course. Omasiridi, who was seated quietly near the doorway, did not speak. The elder continued, but please, balance must be shown publicly. The word balance returned again like an unpaid bill. Already smiled widely. Don't worry, I will represent the house properly. Omasiridi's eyes turned towards the river. That night, as already arranged her festival attire, gold bangles, coral necklace, and a bright wrapper, she spoke without turning around. You would not embarrass me. Ikpendu, who was already half asleep, replied lazily. Who? She already said. She does not embarrass, Ikpendu answered. That is the problem, already snapped. She behaves as if she's beyond embarrassment. Ikpendu laughed. You are overthinking. But already did not laugh. The morning of the festival arrived loud and bright. The sky was clear and the river was calm. Women painted their arms with chalk, while the men tied wrappers tightly around their waists. Already stepped out of the main house, glowing like someone who had practiced in front of a mirror for 2 days. Her beads shone, but her confidence shone louder. On the contrary, Omasiridi stepped out of her small house dressed in simple blue clothes. She wore no heavy jewelry and no dramatic makeup. Her hair flowed down her back freely. A group of young girls whispered, "She's too modest. Maybe she does not understand what a festival is." "She understands more than you," an older woman muttered. As the procession moved toward the riverbank, Ikpendu walked in front with his chest high and his chin lifted. Already followed behind him, while Omasiridi walked last silently. When they reached the river, the elders poured libation. Palm wine was splashed into the water and prayers rose. "River of Odugba, keep blessing us," one elder chanted. The crowd responded, "Amen." After the prayers, they started drinking away their common sense. That was when trouble came knocking. One of Ikpendu's friends, who was already tipsy from early palm wine, shouted playfully, "Chief, between land wife and water wife, which one is sweeter?" Laughter burst from the crowd. Already smiled proudly, but Omasiridi remained still. Ikpendu laughed loudly. He enjoyed attention too much. "You want me to answer?" he teased. "Yes," the crowd roared. By now, Palm wine had loosened his tongue and pride had sharpened it. He raised his cup and exclaimed, "The one from land is a real woman. The other one is just water security. Land is for building house. Water is for bathing." The men burst into laughter. Already covered her mouth, enjoying the moment. Omasiridi remained still. Ikpendu continued, encouraged by the noise. "A real wife is the one whose father collected bride price. The other one," he waved his hand lazily toward the river, "is just environmental support." More louder laughter came. Someone clapped. "Chief, you are wicked." Ikpendu grinned proudly. "Wicked? No, I am practical. When rain falls, we thank the sky, but we don't marry the rain." Even some women laughed now. Still, Omasiridi did not move. Ikpendu leaned forward slightly and increased his voice more. "Let us speak the truth. One is wife, the other is decoration. You know those beautiful things you see floating during festival? Nice to look at, but not for serious matters." The crowd gasped and laughed at the same time. A young man shouted, "Chief, be careful." Ikpendu dismissed him with a wave. "Careful of what? She does not even eat like a normal human being. Have you seen her chew garri before? Always looking as if she's listening to fish gossip." More laughter came. Already laughed openly now. Ikpendu, who was still enjoying himself too much, added the final knife. "Let me be honest. If tomorrow the river takes her back, I will simply say, 'Thank you for the temporary assistance.'" The laughter reduced slightly at that one. The comment was funny, but it was too sharp. Even the wind hesitated. Omasiridi finally lifted her eyes slowly, and the river behind them made an unusual ripple. One drummer missed his beat. The water that had been calm began to move in small circles. An old fisherman stopped smiling and tried to caution him. "Chief!" But Ikpendu did not notice. He was still smiling at his own joke. Uredi leaned towards him proudly and encouraged. "You spoke well." Omasiridi turned slowly toward the river, stepped forward quietly, walked closer to the water, and dipped her fingers into it. The ripple spread outward. An elder cleared his throat loudly to restore order. "Let's continue the Thanksgiving." But the mood had shifted. The water no longer looked friendly. Omasiridi withdrew her hand and looked at Ikpendu for the first time since he spoke. Her eyes did not carry anger. They carried something heavier. Disappointment. Without saying a word, she turned and walked away from the riverbank. The festival continued, but by evening, the first sign of trouble appeared. Ikpendu's boat that had been anchored properly began drifting away without reason. A fisherman ran breathlessly into the square. "Chief, your biggest boat is leaking." Ikpendu frowned. "That is impossible." They rushed over and saw that water had filled half the boat. Men struggled to pull it out. Someone shouted, "The fishes are dead near the nets." Small silver bodies floated on the surface near Ikpendu's fishing area. While other fishermen's nets were fine, only his section looked cursed. He laughed nervously. "It is a coincidence." When he told Uredi, she smiled nervously. "Maybe you offended someone in the market. Who knows?" But her eyes drifted toward Omasiri's small house. That night, Ikpendu could not sleep. He turned restlessly on the bed. Outside, the river sounded louder than usual. It was breathing. He finally stepped outside, followed the sound, and saw Omasiridi standing near the water. Her feet were at the edge. The hem of her clothes touched the surface. He walked closer and called, "Omasiridi!" She did not turn immediately, but when she finally did, her expression was calm. She only said, "You insulted what carried you." Ikpendu swallowed his survivor. It was a joke." "The river does not joke," she said. He laughed small. You are overreacting." She looked at him squarely. and said, "I was patient." The word patient echoed strangely in his chest. Before he could respond, she stepped into the water. The water rose to her knees, then to her waist, then her chest until she became part of the darkness. Ikpendu stood frozen. He told himself it was the trick of light, maybe the trick of mind. He blinked twice and the river surface returned to its ordinary shimmer. No splash, no scream, no evidence. He laughed nervously to himself. "It is palm wine. I took too much palm wine." He turned back and started walking toward the compound with forced confidence. Then, the next morning, Odugba woke up to shouting, "Chief! Chief!" Ikpendu rushed outside, tying his wrapper loosely. "What is it?" His head fisherman stood trembling. The nets are empty." "All of them?" "All of them," the man replied. "That is impossible," Ikpendu said. He marched towards the riverbank, and the sight made his stomach tighten. His section of the water looked wrong. There was no movement of fish. Meanwhile, nearby, fishermen were hauling heavy catches. Laughter rose from their boats, while Ikpendu's boat floated uselessly. One young fisherman whispered, "Maybe his water wife is angry with him." Another fisherman slapped his arm. "Keep quiet." Ikpendu forced authority into his voice and declared, "It is only temporary." But temporary lasted 3 days, then 4 days, then 7 days. On the 8th day, one of his larger boats cracked at the base without collision. The wood split clean as if something had pressed against it from beneath the water. Men refused to enter his boats after that. "Chief, maybe you should appease," one of them said. "Appease what?" Ikpendu snapped. The man lowered his eyes and said, "The river." Meanwhile, inside the compound, Uredi pretended as if nothing was happening. She supervised the cooking loudly, adjusted the curtains, and insulted the lazy maids. But her sleep had become shallow. Every night, she heard water moving too close to the house. One evening, she confronted Ikpendu. "Where is she?" Ikpendu hesitated. "She is around." "Around where? In the sky?" Ikpendu did not answer. Uredi lowered her voice. "You insulted her." "It was just a joke," Ikpendu defended. "Thinking of it now, was it even necessary?" Uredi asked. "She will come back, don't worry," Ikpendu assured, but Uredi was not convinced. That night, thunder rolled without rain and the river began rising slowly. The villagers noticed, the tide is high, but there was no storm today." By midnight, water touched the lower edge of Ikpendu's compound. He rushed outside in disbelief and shouted, "This has never happened without a storm." But the water did not listen. It crept forward confidently. One of his goats broke free and ran uphill, bleating loudly. Men began moving valuables. Women carried their pots on their head. Uredi stepped outside and froze. The water had entered the smaller house near the river path completely. That was Omasiridi's house. But it did not stop there. It continued towards the main building. Ikpendu's heart pounded. "This is not normal," he whispered. The water reached the sitting room and the chair started floating, but something strange happened. When the water reached the doorway of the bedroom where Uredi slept, it slowed, swirled, and hesitated. It entered the sitting room fully, but the bedroom threshold remained dry. Uredi stood there trembling. Ikpendu stared in confusion. "Why is it not entering?" he muttered. In that moment, a memory flashed through Uredi's mind. Months ago, during the early days of gossip, a group of women mocked Omasiridi openly near the well. "She's not human. She smells like fish. She will drown that house one day," they said. That day, Uredi had surprised even herself by defending sharply. "She's still a woman. Respect her." However, she did not defend Omasiridi out of love. She defended her out of pride because nobody mocks what stands inside her compound without permission. Unknown to her, that small defense now stood like an invisible wall. The water respected it. Ikpendu stepped into the flooded sitting room where the water reached his knees and shouted into the night, "Omasiridi!" The river answered with a louder surge. He stumbled backward and the water inside the sitting room began pushing him toward the open doorway. Already screamed, "Come back, come back!" Ikpendu struggled against the current, but the current inside was stronger than the one outside. It dragged him across the floor, across the threshold, and toward the river path. He shouted, "Help!" Men tried to grab him, but they slipped. The water seemed to choose only him. It ignored Uredi, ignored the maids, and ignored the men standing on higher ground. It wrapped around Ikpendu's waist like a living rope. He clawed at the mud. "Omasiri, please, forgive me." At this point, there was no pride in his voice. He was wrapped with fear. From the center of the swollen river, a faint glow appeared and a silhouette formed. Ikpendu's body trembled. "You carried me once. Please carry me again." But the glow did not move closer. The water pulled harder and a voice echoed over the rushing water. "You forgot who carried you." Uredi fell to her knees at the safe spot and cried, "Spare him, please." The water hesitated slightly. It shifted direction for 1 second. The glow turned toward her. Then the water surged one final time. Ikpendu's body slipped beneath the surface and the water swallowed him without a splash. Gradually, the water stopped rising. It withdrew slowly from the compound and the chairs settled back awkwardly. The bedroom remained untouched. By dawn, the river had returned to its normal level. No storm clouds remained, no heavy rain, only mud, broken boats, and the absence of Chief Ikpendu. That morning, search parties were formed, but after hours of searching, they found nothing. Uredi sat inside the dry bedroom, staring at her hands. She had been spared. Nobody announced Ikpendu's death officially. But in river villages, when a body does not return by noon, people stop pretending. An elder entered the compound and stood before Uredi. "We will perform the rites." She nodded. There were no tears in her eyes yet. Shock did not allow her cry immediately. The following morning, men from the council returned. There was business to discuss because when a powerful man disappears, paperwork of ownership begins. The eldest titled man spoke first. Chief Ikpendu owned 7 boats. 6 already corrected them respectfully. 1 boat broke. The men exchanged glances. Yes, that is correct. 6 boats. He also had partnerships. Yes, Uredi nodded. They waited for her to panic, but she did not. She simply gave orders to the maids. "Bring the account books." They brought the books and she began turning the pages carefully. After some moments, she looked up and said, "Half the partnerships were verbal, no signatures." The elders nodded slowly. "That is how he did business. That is how people lose business," Uredi added. Meanwhile, the small house where Omasiridi lived was empty. There was no property left, except for the damp floor and 1 string of beads left near the doorway. Some children gathered to stare. One of them asked, "Did she drown?" An older woman answered, "Water does not drown water." The rumor that Omasiridi was the mermaid grew louder after the incident, but Uredi did not join the conversation. When women came to meet her with questions, she would simply answer, "She lived here, now she does not." That was all. She focused on doing some adjustments. She reduced the staff and converted one building into a smoke drying fish section. She supervised everything personally now. One evening, as she stood near the river, she declared, "I will never ever compete with what I don't understand." The water continued moving naturally. She did not expect a response, so she turned back toward the house. From then on, in Odugba, when someone boasts too loudly near the river, an old fisherman would clear his throat and say, "Remember Ikpendu." Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. Kindly share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye!